started speaking about the fraud, like the deep entrenchment of fraud that we're all under and what's been going on for a long time. So that's one of our charters that moving forward is to be able to look for and uncover the fraud. Because we're not going to fix our personal situations or the general situation if we keep subscribing to it, either unwittingly or knowingly. So the fraud, like one of the areas or tricks with the fraud is that we've got to learn to look out for is the commingling of jurisdictions. So obviously, to know what to look for there, then we need to understand the different jurisdictions of law, and what's law and what's legalese. And we went over that last week, that real law is immutable. It has always existed, always will exist. No one wrote it. It's natural law, spiritual law. So remember all that. And it can't be watered down. It doesn't change. It's indissoluble. And an example of how they commingle the jurisdictions, just one little example. They've said that in our constitution that it's act of Parliament. With the Constitution, it's not for the Parliament to make an act about what our Constitution is. They can codify it for us, but it's not their job to write it for us. So they've commingled things there. And another way that they commit fraud is that they'll make false claims, right? So some of them are obvious, but others are sneaky that we don't pick up on because we haven't had the eye for it. But, so an example of that is that they'll say the Parliament, they say it in one of our, I think, our 1970s, like corporate Australia Parliament Constitution, they say the Parliament is sovereign. Right? So that's a lie. Because Parliament can't be sovereign. Because we know what sovereign means. You take authority from no other. Well, Parliament takes authority from the people. That's where they get their grant of authority from. But now they're trying to tell us that Parliament is sovereign. Okay, so there's a false claim, that's a fraud. And then there's another thing to look out for is when they make omissions. Or, it's unclear or ambiguous in the things that they say. So an example of that was we saw in the oath of office for the police force, which would be similar to parliamentarians and everything else. And their oath was to Her Lady the Queen. So by omission of a full description of who the Queen is, well, they're referring to a fictitious Queen of Australia and not our head of state, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, blah, blah, blah. And I think she's changed her name now too, so that's a whole other sidetrack in story. But, so they're just sort of ways, things to look for in what you're eating and what they're putting out to you as fraud. But they're just like just an idea. It's just sticking forward fast with it. If we can get an eye and a nose for the fraud, we'll be a lot better off. Because I spoke last week about conviction. And it's conviction that gives us our power and our strength and our grounding. And we can't have conviction without being firm in the knowledge. So that's the other thing that we've on our charter that I think that we should all be seeking to do and improve, and that is challenging our knowledge versus belief system that we have within ourselves. So I'll read something which I got given the other night, which I think really is the best way to describe this. Which is why I need my glasses. So knowledge is that which is universally discoverable. It is information that gives clear direction to the actions required to create the conditions that lead to peaceful, harmonious coexistence for all, which is freedom for all. Anything that doesn't give clear direction on how to live in harmony and freedom is not knowledge, it is belief. Knowledge is not changeable, it is constant and can only be added to. So, I guess what that's saying is that knowledge is a bit like how we describe natural law. It's there, it's established, it's fact. And it's our charter to discover that, the fact and the truth, and absorb it, and harness it. Belief is one's private prejudices, biases and proclivities that is subject to change, therefore not universally discoverable. So that's a big difference. Knowledge stays the same, and we can pass it on, and belief fluctuates. The pursuit of confirming one's belief always increases the likelihood of chaos, violence and slavery. So, and we do see that. Because everyone's got different beliefs all around the world. Look how happy the world is. But the world does share basic knowledge of what's true. So that's what we're trying to do, is read more, learn more, get the knowledge, but we need to discern what's right and what's wrong in all of our reading, because you can read a lot and a lot of it can be misleading and a lot of it can put the stuff in it that sounds right because it appeals to us, it's what we want. But then there'll be something in there that's not quite right, and you might skip over that, or just, we won't let that spoil the good bit we read, sort of thing. We do that often. So that's why it's important for us to look for the fraud, because it's pretty deceptive. Fraud is, it's fraud for a reason, and sometimes it likes to give us a tickle on the back while it's lying to us. So, and I suspect in the common law movements that some of that's going on. I'm not going to slander them or say that that is the case, but just some of the things I've read to me leave me feeling unsure about those, because remember I talked about what they had, so that the 4 tenets of common law, do we remember them? Four tenets of common law. So in some of the common law movements, they don't have that. Keep the peace. They have honour your contracts. So that's a completely different jurisdiction to common law. And even with common law, you've got to be careful with that, because there's 3 types of common law. So the government's created their own common law, which they call case law. There's case law, and then there's they just call it common law as well a lot of the time. But there's true common law, 4 tenets of common law, but then when you see case law and some things the government calls common law, as soon as it's referring to persons and it's battling out legislation, then you know it's not common law. So, yeah, so that when we understand that, confirming that, keep always deferring back to what is true law in everything that you're reading, because anything that transgresses natural law is an abomination, and we've got plenty of legislation that does that, and they're making more and more legislation that does that. So that having that conviction is feeding into our conscience. We've all got a conscience for a reason. Look, the word exists for a reason, because we've got a spirit and it knows. And everybody is at different levels of how in touch they are with their conscience and their spirit, and that just depends on the way they live and what other things they choose to subscribe to in life. And so that conscious level that we have, we need to feed that with knowledge, because that's what it's seeking out. No one likes lies. We all hate lies, and we're immersed in it. So, we actually all have been living knowing things aren't right. And we all have, but this isn't right, that's not right, this doesn't add up. And some more than others, I guess, because, like I said, we're all at different levels of where we're at with our conscience and our spirit. But feeding your conscience level, consciousness, and it goes to feeding your conviction, and that's all supported by the knowledge that you have. You're lost without the knowledge. So that's our job. You know, we've all got to feed ourselves. Because what they've been peddling out to everybody is sugar. And even with the freedom movement, which I think is great, because we do need to band together, we need to make a noise, and we need to stand up as great for one another, to know and see that we're not alone, and to send that voice out to the wider community, the people that are sitting on the fence. Now there's purpose in it, in the movement. But even in the movement, there's leaders, but I think they're just throwing out bags of fairy floss. They're still feeding people sugar. But what we're all craving for and starving for is a nourishing meal that wants to stay. You know, because that's a spirit telling us, you know, we want something real, we want remedy, and we want to know where the way forward is for us. So, but that's up to us. If we're only being fed sugar, we've got to go and carve ourselves out a bit of steak. And it's out there for us to get. And a lot of it can be deceptive, so that's why I'm reminding you to look for the fraud and practice your discernment. You know, spend time on something and just gobble it up and taste it. Is it fairy floss or is it steak? So, and really, you know, get practice in understanding the words, because it's all in the wording. And if you can get your head around the fact that words places things in jurisdiction. They have a jurisdiction. So some words belong all down here in contract maritime jurisdiction. They don't belong in the real world, in reality. And you'll get better at those words, but it's interesting to note that our day-to-day language that we use has been bred into us without us realising, because we haven't known this, but most of our wording that we use today places us down here. You know, we say, oh, he's a good person. You know, I'm not a person that will do that. You know, so we're calling ourselves persons. It's just our language. We don't understand the weight of that. You know, there's a lot of weight in everything we say. And I actually am of the opinion more and more that spiritual law, our spiritual quality of life, because, you know, they say what you affirm, you know, with the spoken word is powerful, and what you can cast on others and yourself with what you say. You always see that person that says, oh, nah, I got not one lot, I think I'm the most unluckiest person in the world, you know? And they never win anything. And they just keep cursing themselves, because they say it all the time. I was guilty of that. So I had to train myself to say something different about myself all the time. But that's law. So the law world, the legal world, it has an effect. The wording is important. Like I think it's tied in with spirituality for some reason. That's I'm just developing that thought about it more and read. Because it's so important, wording. So, in our day-to-day lives then, we've got to get our head around the idea of what is the colour of law. So, we get presented with things all the time, constantly, as law. So that they're trying to tell Samina it's law. You got to get vaccinated by the 28th. Or your job's not there. It's a law. So that's the colour of law. And a policeman will come up to your municipal and the first thing you ask is for your driver's licence, been through this. That's the first thing they want. And if you object, they get pretty upset. And they'll tell you it's a law. When in fact it's not the law. But that's the colour of law. They present themselves as law, got a uniform and a badge and a gun and an attitude. That impresses you as, oh, that's a law. So that's the colour of law. And it's pretty much established that the whole government is pushing itself around on us under the colour of law. Well, that's a fact. So if we can get our head around seeing what is the colour of law and knowing what really is law, we'll be much better off. And I'll talk about that, like we'll all have our different levels of battling with that as we go, because it's a big because you could spend all day, every step of the way, all day fighting the world and arguing. You could be right. But you have to find your own level of conviction about what battle is right for you, where you stand your ground on something. And, just because we become enlightened, we don't not expected to fight every battle we see. Get worn out. But it's a change in here and here, and the consciousness that we have about it is important, because that's what we need to emit out now to other people around us. And you'll know when that battle is right for you to stand and dig your heels in. Come, but you won't be able to do it unless you really believe. And even if you believe, you won't be able to do it unless you train yourself, get firm in the knowledge. So, and I guess that's really why I've been having these meetings, is to just encourage everybody in that. Because we don't want to live this rubbish lie all the time any longer. It needs changing, and it can only really change from us. So, right? So, similar to the common law movement. It's the same really, only that these guys, so with the common law movement, they're focusing on our constitution, the 1900 constitution, 1901. Okay, so now in the UK they're focusing on the British constitution, but in Australia they're relying on our 1900 or 1901. Sorry about my writing. Right. So they're relying on that. These guys are relying on the Magna Carta. As the cornerstone and the fortress, the bedrock of their law. It all boils down to, this spells out that we're free men and women, created by God, not bound to be enslaved, do no harm, like the 4 tenets of common law. And the people are not subservient to anyone or anything. And the critical thing in that is the rule of law. So, while on the face of it, and I'm not putting this down, because I don't know whether they're willfully deceiving or they just haven't clued on yet, that there's some fraud that they're not picking up. So, like I say, I don't know if that's willful or just ignorance. But there's a whole lot of fraud in this. And Rod Carleton's fantastic. I love him. Like he's a big man.
Yeah.
I think his heart's heart of gold. He's doing a lot of work. And thank goodness we got him. But I don't know whether he's willfully dismissing this or not. I'm waiting for, I've sent some emails and some questions, I haven't got any answers back yet, but so he's relying on our constitution, because that's the pinnacle of what we were given as a free and sovereign nation, that unified the colonies in the states, and that's what we were handed as now our birthright and everything as part of fledgling nation.
So what bits of the practical of the Magna Carta is he questionable in? What do you notice?
No, I don't know, but I've asked the question of how much of the Magna Carta is included in.
Yeah, right.
Yes. And also I've asked, let's say hopefully it does get in and we can secure balance of power, the independence, so that we can keep these other bastards on us a bit more, get the foot off the throat at least. But I've asked them, what's the way forward then? What are we going to address? Because there's fraud in here. So I don't know that he would agree with me that there's fraud in here. And how much of this is in here, and how much of this are we going to address, reassess, improve, so that we don't have the disaster that we've gotten ourselves into again, and how much of this are we going to include in it? And I also asked how much of this actually caters to our First Nations.
Yeah, that's right. I know nothing about any of this, but the fact that our Constitution doesn't recognise Aboriginals is immediately outrageous.
Right. Yeah. So,
but the fact that it's so impossible to change, to even correct something like that, through a referendum.
First Nations people are better off not being in that.
Yeah, well,
They're
that's...
not under white man law.
Yeah.
well, they're sovereign in their own right.
Yeah.
And in fact, if you ask me, they're the only real lawful body
Yes.
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
So,
but, I mean, there's corruption in the fact, philosophically, that they never got recognised. And we can hardly change anything in the Constitution. It's so hard to get anything changed. Because people are not caring about getting informed.
or
about
educated, yeah.
and it's complicated because there are vested interests every time they want to change the Constitution. There's stuff going on that most people, including us, I'll talk myself in, have no clue about what. I mean, when they're trying to change the Constitution, like not having a monarchy and all that was going on back there, I mean, you never get the story as to what is actually behind this whole thing. So, yeah, maybe it's good that we just say no to everything, but it doesn't get us anywhere forward to improve it. I mean, they're all constructs to keep us in our place, the whole lot of it, really, whether even the Magna Carta probably does too. I don't know, because I haven't studied that, but I mean, any laws that are put forward to tell us how we're meant to behave probably are suspect from the beginning. I don't know.
Which question did you want me to answer first? So the Magna Carta, and I haven't read it in full, but what I understand is that's the most beautiful and perfect document which pronounces or describes, proclaims like the freedom of man. That men are free, and not to be subjugated. And that's why they've been very busy. Ever since they wrote it, it was written in 1217, I think they had a go at it. I think in 1220, 21 or 2, and another crack at, yeah. And 1297. So a lot of people talk about the 1297 one, but that's the one that the Pope got his hands on. So you know that one's stuff. Because the Pope loves us and wants us to be free. That constitution there, so that wasn't written by the people. That was written by all the parliamentarians and the powers that be. And then it was sent to Queen Victoria, and she made 83 or 84 amendments. So, who makes the Constitution? People make it. It can't be written by parliaments or kings or queens or anyone else telling what the people's constitution is. And people make it. So, I guess, in answer to what you're saying, to change that will be very difficult because there's always agendas. But we can't have the CEO of McDonald's or Twiggy Forrester and Clyde Palmer. They're not the people that are going to go, right, we've got this country back. Clyde's going to ring Rod Cullerton up when they've got the balance of power. Yeah, well, let's tell the people we'll fix the Constitution. And they're all right. That's another no-no. The people make it. But the people are so uneducated. What do they want? They want free Wi-Fi. You'll have free Maccas and free Wi-Fi in your Constitution.
And they want NBN to work.
Yeah. So it is difficult. It is difficult.
And a beer on Friday night.
Yeah.
The
ScoMo shout every Friday. Uncle Bob's shout. And then these guys, the critical thing here is that the government shot themselves in the foot by refusing to do treaties. They had plenty of treaty opportunities and they promised some, but thank goodness they never made any. In my opinion, you don't want a treaty with the bastards. You want to stay here where you never see the sovereignty. You never treated with a fraudulent, fictitious institution. You remain pure and unseated in your sovereignty, even though you've been overtaken. At least you've held on to this. Right, so to this day, that's why I say they're the only true authority. Because our government is an imposter. So what's the Australian government? The Australian government, right? What are they defined as? it here on my phone, but I'm not going to waste my time trying to find. I'll just try and remember it close enough. But they defined as geographically. So we know they're a corporation, but geographically they are defined as Norfolk Island, Cocos Islands, and there's, I don't know, it's not Lord Howe, but I don't know, we'll just say Lord Howe for now, right? Now they use the word in there, geographically including, they say including, right? These areas, but in law terms and in legalese terms, when you say including, that also means excluding. Right, so whatever's not included on the list, it's not in it. So that the word including legally means it includes this. No, it's not that, and it includes this here too. It just means it includes this. Right, so that's all it includes. That. So I don't know where their head office is. It might be the ABC radio station on Norfolk Island, which is quite interesting that they put one there. Maybe that's why. Probably a bunker underneath it. With all their gold or something that they've stolen. So it doesn't include Terra Australis. I think it's double L, isn't it? No. No? Look right. Terra Australis, mainland, or Tasmania. Which I think is Tasmania part of Terra Australis. No. Pretty sweet. So, how did I get onto that? So that's right. So they've never said it. So they're the only sovereign people here, and because our government's an imposter. They're a corporation based here, and they're running the show in our land, under the colour of law, telling us that they've got authority, that we gave them authority. Well, no, they don't even say that now. They just say we're in charge. Because they've completely tried to forget about that somebody's got to give them authority. Because the whole notion of government is that they're not sovereign. Parliament is not sovereign. People are sovereign. And the government sits underneath people and takes direction from the people. They make laws, the laws that they're entitled to make are, I'll read this out. Well, they're to administrate the will of its creator, man. That's the role of government. In order to secure and protect the property of man and organise the infrastructure, labour and services necessary for peaceful, dignified coexistence, and to collect and distribute resources equitably for all people to share in and enjoy the abundance of life on this planet, on this nation. So that's their sole job. It's not hard. And how far are they strayed from that?
As far as you can Australia, it's not something.
Yeah. So they're getting around like they've created themselves and they're in charge and they're supreme and sovereign. So what a hoax. And how did they get this presumed power? By bluffing people, and people just went, oh, okay. And we still do every day, every step of the way.
And they're fully board.
Yeah. So, yeah, glasses again.
So what's the Peckamaroo thing?
I'll get to that. Yeah, I'll answer that.
I've been curious about that for forever. And then I just think, oh, what the hell is that?
When I first heard about the Peckamaroo thing, I thought, oh, far out, that was like deep, because that was this time last year, when I really first started reading things, and I was pouncing on everything. But as it turns out, I think all that is that some jokers that are onto it all, just to show the example,
They did it for a joke.
in a way, like to
Yeah,
show that
okay.
they just registered these names.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so I've dismissed it.
So that's how you see it, as just a group of shit stirrers that have registered.
The Peckamaroo thing, I think, yes.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that there's truth in it, in the concept that yes, all these, because every government agency is a corporation.
Yeah.
Sub branches of the
But
big
they
corporation.
own the names. Peckamaroo owns the names, or
Yeah.
so they claim.
Yeah.
Because I haven't researched all of that,
Mm.
because that's a job.
Yeah.
So, do they own those names or not? Has anyone actually looked at that?
I did see something where they came out and the guys that stuck their hand up as being responsible for creating that.
Yeah.
But I didn't watch it all, I didn't go right into it, so couldn't really
Yeah.
discuss it with you really, other than to say that my understanding of that is that's just, well, not a hoax or anything, but it's not, I don't think it's true that it's Peckamaroo Company owns these, and the Peckamaroo Company is owned by Stephanie somebody and
Yeah.
Charles Stephen someone.
Yeah.
I think that's been made up, but not to say though that like all our corporate government bodies,
Yeah.
they are owned. You know, they're companies.
But they can't be owned by two people. They're either owned by Peckamaroo or they're owned by who is owning? Who does own
Yeah,
those
well I don't
companies?
think Peckamaroo is,
No.
or
So-
Stephanie and Charles Stephen. Or,
So, who's done the research to find out who does own the Australian
Yeah,
taxation?
you wouldn't ever find out.
Yeah.
That's the
It's
thing.
all part of that
But by nature of being a
main
company,
conspiracy.
but they're supposed to, as a company, they're supposed to have all that transparently up there for all to see.
Yeah.
It's a public company.
Yeah.
But they're operating as a private company.
Yeah. So it's all hidden in the
So then there's no,
supposedly hidden in the
accountability.
reserve bank system and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Yes.
so I would be fair to say that the people that own everything else in the world own these.
Yeah.
Because it's registered in America
Yeah.
and
But they allowed Peckamaroo to actually register those names.
yeah,
They did get it through.
Yeah, but
according to that story.
I think a result of that is that the governments had to change their names of their services.
Oh. Okay.
And that, I think that was the point of it.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, so,
To make it more obvious.
yeah, because I started watching and reading something else about, like, they've got this permanent application in for these business names or
Yeah.
something, and I can't quite recall
It's a good shit
the body
story.
of that, what I was
Maybe
watching.
we should do something.
Yeah. And somehow link the accounts.
The budget council
There's some
executive.
transfers.
Budget council executive
Yeah,
incorporated.
yeah. Well, who knows what they're really running on.
Owned by us.
So that's another thing too. The local council or local government is another fraudulent and fictitious setup. Illegal. Because when I say illegal, because it's just a fraud on another fraud anyway, but in the other fraud, in 1988, they did something about this, and it wasn't meant to happen, but just like with the Australia Act, they went ahead and did it anyway. Because in the referendum, they said no. So, that's another thing I've just started to get my hands on, the information about local government and how rates are another form of tax. And so you can't have GST on the rates because you can't tax a tax. So that's the common law movement is relying on our constitution, on our constitution, and Rod Cullerton's doing the same. Not that he's necessarily tied in with these guys, but he has done serving. He served the GG, and all that kind of stuff. But where that line of approach is different to what these guys are purporting to do. So, well, for starters, this started in the UK anyway, but the essence of this is that as that is a fraud, right, and we are part of the Commonwealth, we are actually all still UK subjects, right, under the British Constitution, because we're part of the Commonwealth. So that applies to us because that's quite strong in the British Constitution. That's the cornerstone of the British Constitution. Okay, so, and in the Magna Carta, with the rule of law, is right now. So I'm all for right, like, don't get me wrong. I'm all for him, but once we get in and get the balance of power and we can make some changes, I'd like to see the whole thing dissolved, rebuilt. So I want more than what I think God wants out of it all. And all of these public assets, which have been built and paid for by the people with their taxes and their hard work and everything, the government's job was to keep them in trust, right, for future generations, and to share for the people equitably amongst all the people. That's their job, is just to protect our combined wealth, the evidence of our labour, manage it for our prosperity. They've stolen it from us, sold it, now they're selling, well, that document there, well, they're talking about selling, are they selling the Corporation of Australia? Well, that would be Norfolk Island and Cocos Islands. Yeah. And then the management, I'm assuming, of that company, which means management of us. Assumed management of us. So, what do we class as in the bill of sale? Stock in holdings? Yeah, that's probably why we have to do the census. How many people are we buying? And geez, the cupboard's bare, you know. You flogged everything out of the place before you sold it to us. You're selling this an empty,
Vacant possession.
yeah. It's like selling a farm with no fences, no dam.
No life.
Yeah, and you can't have the shed because we've leased that to the neighbour for 100 years. So that's what these jokers are doing, just robbing us blind. Unlawfully so. So back to the rule of law. So with the practical lawful dissent, guys, That's what they call themselves. So, and with them, like you can follow the new charters, which I must admit has been hard to find on YouTube. But somehow by accident I found a really good video of one of the guys talking. It was anything that I've tried to explain to you in the last couple of weeks, he just spelled out beautifully in an hour, with much better words. Probably because he's a Pommy and he went to private school. The new charters. These guys are, sort of in line with practical lawful descent concept, and that is they focus on the Magna Carta and the rule of law. And the rule of law is like is that law, the law rules, the law, not legalese, right? And it's the law is there for everybody equally. No one is above the law, and no one is below it or beyond the reach of it. But it's there equally for all. And so with the head of state, has no more privilege of the law than Johnny down the road. And so, in actual fact, the head of state, when the head of state is in office, acting in the role as head of state, you know how I said like the head of state is equal to the people? That's true in the sense that the head of state, what am I trying to say? While they're in office,
They're a servant of the people.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. When they're out of office as a man or woman, they are equal, but they are the servant. But as the head of state, they act for the body of people as a collective. So that's the rule of law, and with the rule of law you have trial by jury and annulment by jury. And we don't have that. We're in our legal system, we have trial by jury, like with everything. We might have it for big cases, like he's pleading not guilty, so it's got to go to trial. But every case, in every matter, should be tried by jury. That's our right under the rule of law. And so that body of people that's sitting in the jury, I'm a tradesman, so my peers would be people in my spectrum. So other tradesmen, farmers, blue collar people, not doctors, accountants, business people, 12 people that went to private boarding college. They're not my peers. So that's how it works. And so, conversely, someone of a different platform to me, society, would have equal peers afforded to him. Because they're the people that are best to understand the circumstances surrounding whatever the issue is this person's been charged with, the claim that's been made against them, and whether because the basis of it is whether there's mens rea, which is criminal intent, willful intent. So, you could have done something horrible by accident, and it doesn't mean that you escape consequence for that, and that you aren't required to remedy that. We're all required to make remedy, but it's difference with mens rea where there's intent. So as to whether you're guilty or whatever that charge is, that like you've done something. And so your peers have to best understand that who it is. So that's the basis of trial jury, and then an element trial jury goes on. So that's how we keep our legislation clean. So not all legislation is, but we need to have legislation, but it gets, well, I'll say that, but it's gone off track where it's actually a tool to imprison us. That's what it's been used for in legalese. But it keeps laws honest, simple and pure. Laws that capture what is real crime and a real breach or real trespass. How have we trespassed somebody? So legislation and legalese loves it because there's lots of money to be made there everywhere, isn't it? Like they keep grafting money off us. That's what it's designed to do. To send to the corporation, and it all goes overseas. All this tax, like a huge amount of tax and fees, and we all know out of the dollar that we earn, I think we keep, what do you keep, 20 cents of that? And the rest of it's gone in, goes to them, to the others. So, practical lawful dissent, they also require us to dissent. Not they, but the concept. Requires us to not give consent. So, once we know what we know, and we've been uncovering and we realise it's all fraud, well, what are we to do with that? So it's our responsibility to not comply as much as we can. So we were talking about voting and everything before, and I've been talking to my mate Ivan that is a great wealth of information and insight about all this practical lawful dissent and everything, and it's fantastic. What it is with that is that they're saying that voting is a fraud, which it is, because you're partaking in the fraud, you're voting for a fraudulent system. So, and I totally agree. So by voting, we're partaking in the fraud, we're going against everything that we've been talking about tonight. So it's very difficult because, while I totally agree with the concept, I am also of the belief, well, now more than ever with this, everyone needs to vote right and get the independence in, because it's not going away just because we decide not to vote. By deciding not to vote, we're still actually aiding and abetting that system. So we need to vote and get it right, and at least try and get a wedge in there to get some relief and remedy, and hopefully have that more voice with what we're on about to make changes. So just
A vote for what Paul calls wouldn't be forced.
no, that's right. Well, to a point, because that is still a question mark for me. If he just relies on the 1900 Constitution, then that's where he stops. At just rectifying that, I don't know that that's enough. But it's a start, so I'm not going to, that's not good enough, so I don't want to know about it. No, I'm going to just wipe my nose off, spot my face, like that. And he's, thank goodness he's out there doing that. So, right, so in the, as we go through, like, how do we defend ourselves, just quickly, so Samantha's a great example. We just continually rebut, right? Because they're trying to bluff something on you, right? And So hand in hand with not agreeing or consenting, so you're dissenting, so that's that practical law of consent, right? All the time, and you're dissenting initially by rebutting, you rebut everything.
Yes.
Because when someone makes a claim, under the law, the claimant, right, bears they bear the burden of proof. So if you're going to make a claim, you have to substantiate what the trespass is or the claim or what the authority that you've got to make this claim. It's not up to the other person, the respondent, and you don't get a voice of the respondent. You're not, if you're the respondent, then you've just bought into their game,
Yeah.
right?
So you literally say nothing.
No,
No.
no,
Rebut.
because that's assent, and they take assent to consent.
Yeah, so
So,
the,
That's how they got away
so
with it.
you disagree with everything they say,
acquiescence.
rebut.
Silence.
If you don't say, I do not consent,
I do not,
I
okay.
do not consent, they take your silence for assent.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like your assent to consent.
So you physically, you say,
With,
I do not consent, I do not agree.
so with every,
Or you
For
just
us,
rebut.
a
with
question.
every move that they've made, each time they've made a move, I've countered that with a response.
Yeah.
And,
That's not true, no, that's not.
and.
Or
No,
you've been requiring them to prove.
Under what authority?
To prove.
Under what authority?
Can you show me the law?
Exactly, all of it, like masses of stuff, and they just absolutely ignored all of it because they haven't got a plan. And I signed a document, Samina Busby, like to my boss, and my name and address, but I've signed it like my name, Samina Busby, sovereign living woman, all rights reserved. Yeah,
So how come you like that? It's very likely.
so,
There is a few communities around Australia that have served their local council.
Yeah,
My brother's just done an overhaul, hasn't it?
yeah,
I
good.
just went around, so I think the signatures off and run through a few documents together, and then serve the man.
Yeah, I'd like us all get to the point when we're maturing what we're doing to serve police, the courthouse, mayor. Serve him first, eh?
yeah, it's getting good, right?
Yeah, and not just the mayor, but you serve them all individually and as a collective. The school teachers
Yes.
and the bloody doctors.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
And pharmacists.
Yep, pharmacists too, yep. And that little weedy will turn out that works at the newspaper.
Oh, the news agent,
Yeah.
nuts.
Little weasel.
Oh, yes, I have
Yeah.
a result. So, with my personal experience from the newsagent,
Oh, not just, yeah, okay, I mean the newspaper. but
okay, so I had an experience at the news agency. And so I proceeded, so my thing was I then proceeded with writing her a letter and sent it via registered mail. It was ignored. So, which I expected, which was good. Because now that gave me,
She's agreed with what you said now.
that's given me the, ammo, yeah, the levity to lodge a complaint, a formal complaint with the Anti-Discrimination Commissioner.
Yeah.
So that was before Christmas or about Christmas time? About Christmas time, thereabouts. It's been about 2 months since I sent that off. And I received a phone call at work yesterday that I've been assigned a case manager, and they discussed the matter and have decided that it warrants investigation. So they're proceeding with that.
Yeah, good.
So their initial part of the process is they will issue her with a letter with a finite date of response, and then take it from there, depending on whether she responds or not and what the response is.
So we can support that by having everybody that's ever had a interaction with that business, write a letter of support
Yeah.
to add weight to it,
Yes.
and that's how you really hold these people accountable.
Yeah. So also the encouragement is, because I understand that quite a few people have had problems with that person.
Yeah,
So I've encouraged them through my own experience with what I've just done to lodge their own complaint also, because the more times that the name of that business comes up, they are flagged, and they will be very heavily investigated.
yeah. And so they should be.
Yeah.
But they think they are protected probably.
No,
They
Because-
think.
it's got it all wrong.
Because
That's
they've
what they
willfully
think.
taken part in all of this and broken all the well-established
They
laws
did.
that have been there
Yeah.
to protect us.
They think the government, they have their back, but they
No.
don't.
No.
They
No,
don't.
no,
That's
no.
what they think.
Yeah,
That's why they
yeah,
are like that.
no, she's just.
So-
Government protected.
Yeah, that's what they think. So that's what the government said.
But I think there's a degree of fear in that as well, in their defence. I
Yes.
mean, they're frightened and
They
they're
are.
doing the right thing.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, the fears
Some.
work on everybody, like individuals and businesses and.
The fear is
But I
all
don't
on.
think they are just standing up and going, well, yes, you. I think they're saying, no, I'm doing the right thing. This is.
Yeah, a lot of the things they are doing the right thing. It's that it's the same as the ignorance with this.
Yeah,
But that's
They're doing
how
right.
you teach the population, is to punish a few.
That's right.
And then the rest go, ooh, I won't be doing that. It's costing $50,000.
yeah.
And,
Yeah.
everyone's had 2 years to wise themselves up on things. That's my, no, I don't, I'm not, well, got much tolerance. Yeah, so that, this is our tools, you know, like continually rebut, always rebut, and always, so you're not buying into whatever they're placing on you, you're returning everything with a further question, returning the burden of proof on them to substantiate or validate or have evidence of the claim, you know, or the trespass, or, you know, so their colour of law that they're presenting to you, which they've done to Samina, presenting that it's law, that she must get vaccinated to attend work. Well, what a load of bullshit. Big lie. You know, so it's not law, it's the colour of law, and so Samina's just returned and rebutted with, can you please supply me the documentation of the law that outlines that? And can you please supply me how that, you know, like Privacy Act? And can you, blah, blah, blah. Can you please supply me with, you know, your safety data sheet? And a whole raft of things. But you just keep replying things back to people until you work out, well, they haven't got an answer.
We've gone 3 rounds with them now.
Yeah.
What I meant to vaccination is people should just give up again. I call out in the news for 1,000 every day. The government got a first of December, if you wasn't vaccinated, you wouldn't be out on site. And the only tanker driver that goes out there that does not be vaccinated. Then they told all their employees, there's about 220 employees out there, if you're not vaccinated, you don't have a job by the 1st of December. A couple of storemen lost their jobs at the 1st of December. 2 of the fitters and 2 of the millers stood their ground and said, no, we're not, that's not happening. Well, they couldn't sack them, because if they sack them 4 people, their mill doesn't come. So there's the power, it's just in the people. But people, the problem with the society today that I see is, I don't care about you, Jack, because I'm all good.
Yeah. That's right.
And that's how we're educated. That's the system that we live in, is I don't care about you because I'm all good. I don't care you're getting sacked, I'm still got mine. But I was prepared to lose $300,000 a year. That's what I turn over in my business. I was prepared to just walk away from my homes and everything else to see my granddaughter grow up. That's what I was after. No, I don't care about anything. I don't speak to police with any respect. I don't give, if no one gives me the respect that I expect, I don't give it back in return. that's their hybrid model. You know,
I
so,
think in Australia it's been so easy and we've never been that challenged, but I mean, I've got friends that had to escape Uruguay and whatever, like they'd been put in jail. They were tried, this guy that I know who's awesome, he was tried and then they put him back in jail, right? So when he got out of jail, he decided he had to leave the country because it was that bad, right? So I mean, we don't have stories like that in Australia, really. We don't see it. That you live in that outside of Montevideo where all the insurrectionists are. We wouldn't know any of them. So they just focused on that. They arrived at dinner and took them all apart because they are known associates or potentially known associates. Try them, put him back in. And anyway, he's an amazing family, a whole lot of them. The wife, similarly, I worked with the wife. They came out here and worked 18 hours a day and whatever, and she didn't even know she was a refugee. He told her years later that she was actually a refugee because he escaped, and that was the terms that he escaped under. And she's going, you never told me I was a refugee. Anyway, interesting story, but and she used to go off about stuff. She was Spanish, whatever, and I got it, totally get it. When you got and people just, you know, the other people will some work with her in a bank and they go, oh, that crazy Spanish woman, right? And you go, no, she's actually got a clue, baby, because and we're not like that. We're not like, oh, go fuck yourself, you know, like anyone who says that in the street and people go, oh, that's not the Aussie way. You just put up and shut up. Everything's all good.
Yeah. So, with all this, you know, just pretend you're playing poker and you've got 4 aces and the joker in your hands. Right? But somehow or other, the government's been bluffing everybody that they've got a better hand. That's what it's like. Whatever you remain in the law, that's the hand you've got. So don't be bluffed out of it, because that's all they've got is bluff. And one way to help do that is because, my brother said this to me last night, perfect. He said, because, you know, that when we're at the marches, they sacked Dan Andrews, sacked them all, right? But that's what we've got to do. But in your mind and in your living, that's what you do. You sack them. Sack them from their role. Sack them from that ingrained position that they've had in us all our lives by you know, just what's been bred into us. Sack them. And that's the simplest way to put it. So, my brother comes out with goodies every now
You've
and
got
then.
to say that all the time. Think it and ask what those words are actually going to come with your thoughts. So
That's
I think what
right.
you're saying, that's what you want to happen, sack them all, sack them all, sack them all.
Yeah, that's right, spoken word. But sack them in your mind and your heart. They don't have that role anymore. Because when you do that, then you release yourself. So, I thought that was the most powerful thing that he said simply to me last night. To just explain everything. So I'll leave that one with you.
Don't think it's like too far gone. Can it be turned around? That's why they've got to keep going. They can't come back.
Well, yeah, they
We're sold out.
they say when the fraud stops, then the force comes, don't they?
Yeah.
Because they can't hold it together anymore by fraud. Once you realise they can't bluff you, then they get angry.
Like Canada.
Yeah. So,
like you use
Yes.
Russia.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
yeah, so, I mean, be prepared if you're going to take the bear, not the bait. And they don't want to let it go. They're like spoiled children. They've had it their own way the whole time. If you take the lollipop off them, they've had a good crack at it.
No, they're going to take.
Can't stand anybody looking at it. You know, and they're going to chuck the biggest wobbly and get physical. Can you imagine that? That's exactly what they'll be like. Spoiled, rotten kids, but bad ones.